My dad claimed bankruptcy and cut me off completely. Then I found out he was secretly buying my stepbrother a private island resort. I found out because of a wedding invitation. Not my wedding, my stepbrother Ethan's, and the invitation accidentally included a document that was never meant for me. By the time I opened it, my father had spent 3 years telling everyone he was broke, 3 years of canceled family gatherings, 3 years of hearing that money was tight, 3 years of watching him guilt-trip me whenever I asked questions, and one attachment changed everything. For most of my life, my dad was obsessed with fairness. At least that's what he claimed. After my parents divorced when I was 12, he constantly reminded me that he loved me and my younger sister equally. When he married Linda 5 years later, he expanded that speech. Now it was about loving all the children equally. Me, my sister Chloe, and Linda's son Ethan. At first, things seemed fine. Ethan was only a year older than me. We weren't close, but we got along. The favoritism started slowly. Dad paid for Ethan's first car. He said Ethan needed transportation for work. When I asked for help with a used car a year later, Dad said I needed to learn independence. Ethan got help with college tuition. I got loans. Whenever Chloe or I pointed it out, Dad always had an explanation. Every situation was somehow different. Every exception somehow benefited Ethan. But the differences were small enough that we couldn't prove anything. Then everything changed 3 years ago. Dad announced he was facing financial disaster. He gathered everyone for dinner. I still remember how dramatic he looked. He told us several investments had collapsed. He said he was close to bankruptcy. He said he might lose everything. Linda cried. Ethan looked concerned. Dad spent the entire evening explaining how difficult things would become. A month later, he sold his boat. Then he canceled family vacations. Then he stopped giving birthday gifts. Then he stopped helping Chloe with graduate school expenses. When she asked why, he looked genuinely hurt. "I'm barely surviving." That became his favorite sentence. "I'm barely surviving." Whenever I visited, he complained about money. Whenever relatives asked questions, he complained about money. Whenever someone suggested a family trip, he complained about money. The weird thing was that nothing else seemed to change. He still lived in the same house. He still drove luxury vehicles. He still belonged to the same country club. But whenever anyone mentioned that inconsistency, he became defensive. According to him, appearances were misleading. The house was heavily mortgaged. The cars were leased. The club membership was a business obligation. There was always an explanation. Then Chloe got engaged. She asked Dad if he could contribute anything toward the wedding, even a small amount. He refused immediately. He gave a speech about financial responsibility. He talked about sacrifice. He talked about hard times. Chloe cried in the parking lot afterward. I sat with her for almost an hour. That was the first time she said something that stuck with me. "I don't think he's actually broke." I told her she was angry. I told her she was looking for reasons, but secretly I wondered too, because something felt off. A few months later, Ethan announced his engagement. The difference was immediate. Dad suddenly became involved in wedding planning. He attended meetings. He toured venues. He spent weekends discussing decorations. Whenever Chloe noticed, Dad insisted he wasn't paying for anything. He said Ethan and his fiancée were covering the costs themselves. That explanation seemed plausible until the guest list drama started. Ethan wanted a destination wedding. Dad initially claimed it was impossible, too expensive, financially irresponsible, completely unrealistic. Then 2 weeks later, Ethan announced they had found the perfect location, a luxury resort on a private island. Nobody understood how they could afford it. Ethan worked in sales. His fiancée taught elementary school. They weren't struggling, but they weren't wealthy. When relatives asked questions, Ethan just smiled. He said they had received help. When someone asked from whom, Dad quickly changed the subject. That was the first clue I should have taken seriously. Instead, I ignored it. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Then the wedding invitations arrived. Mine came digitally. Most guests received printed invitations. According to Ethan, it was a cost-saving measure. That annoyed me, but I let it go. A week later, he texted me. He said he accidentally sent the wrong attachment with my invitation. I hadn't even opened it yet. That immediately made me curious. I opened the email. There was the invitation and another PDF. The file name meant nothing to me. At first glance, it looked like real estate paperwork. Then I saw my father's name. I kept reading, and my stomach dropped. The document referenced a resort acquisition. Not a rental, not a venue booking, an acquisition, a purchase. The property description included dozens of guest villas, private beaches, marina facilities, restaurant operations. The listed buyer wasn't Ethan. It was a holding company connected to my father. I thought I was misunderstanding something, so I called Chloe. She came over immediately. We spent hours reading the document. Neither of us worked in real estate. But one thing was obvious. This wasn't wedding paperwork. This was ownership paperwork. The purchase price was several $1 million. Several million. For 3 years, Dad had claimed bankruptcy. For 3 years, he had refused financial help to his own children. For 3 years, he had acted like every dollar mattered, and somehow he was involved in buying an island resort. I confronted Ethan first. Not Dad. Ethan. I sent him screenshots. His response took 4 hours. When it arrived, it was one sentence. Please don't bring this up right now. Not confusion, not denial, not surprise, just a request. That made everything worse. The next morning, Dad called. He sounded furious, not embarrassed, not apologetic, furious. He demanded to know why I was reading documents that weren't meant for me. I reminded him they were sent to me. He ignored that. Then he told me the paperwork was being misunderstood. I asked him directly, "Are you buying Ethan a resort?" Long silence. Then he said something strange. "It's more complicated than that." I asked what that meant. He wouldn't explain. Instead, he accused me of creating family conflict. That conversation ended with him hanging up. 2 days later, relatives started calling me. Apparently, Dad had been talking. According to him, I was spreading false rumors. According to him, I was jealous of Ethan. According to him, I was trying to sabotage the wedding. The speed of the narrative shocked me. He had clearly been preparing. People repeated the same phrases, same explanations, the same accusations. It sounded rehearsed. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. Something bigger was happening. I started talking to relatives individually, not arguing, just asking questions. Patterns emerged. Several family members believed Dad was bankrupt. Others believed he had recovered recently. A few believed Ethan had become unexpectedly wealthy. Nobody had the same story, but everyone was confident they knew the truth. That inconsistency bothered me, because lies usually require maintenance, and maintaining different versions becomes difficult. Then my aunt revealed something interesting. 6 months earlier, Dad had asked everyone not to discuss finances around Chloe or me. At the time, she assumed he was embarrassed. Now it sounded different, almost strategic. The more I dug, the stranger things became. Dad had never actually filed for bankruptcy. Not once. He had claimed he was facing bankruptcy. Then gradually, everyone started saying he was bankrupt. The distinction mattered because technically he had never lied directly. He had simply allowed assumptions to grow. That realization changed everything. I wasn't dealing with a financial crisis. I was dealing with reputation management. The question was why. The answer arrived unexpectedly. My grandmother got involved, Dad's mother. She was 82, sharp as ever, and completely unimpressed by family drama. She invited me over. Then she closed the door and said something that stunned me. "Your father has been terrified for years." "Terrified of what?" She sighed. Then she told me a story. 10 years earlier, Dad had made a massive financial mistake, not bankruptcy level, but embarrassing. A business venture failed. He lost a substantial amount. The family mocked him. His business partners questioned him. His confidence never recovered. According to Grandma, Dad became obsessed with appearances afterward. He needed people to see him as successful, important, respected. He hated feeling judged. That explained some things, but not the resort. Then she explained Ethan. Ethan idolized Dad completely, unlike Chloe and me. We challenged him, questioned him, disagreed with him. Ethan never did. Ethan treated Dad like a hero, and Dad loved it. Over the years, their relationship became less about parenting and more about validation. Dad wasn't buying loyalty. He already had loyalty. He was buying admiration. The resort wasn't a gift. At least not exactly. It was a monument, a way to prove his success. A way to create the image he desperately wanted. Suddenly, dozens of memories made sense. The favoritism, the secrecy, the financial crisis narrative, everything. But one piece still didn't fit. Why pretend to be broke? Grandma answered that too. If everyone thought money was tight, nobody would question why your father wasn't helping you. I just stared at her, she continued. If he openly favored Ethan, people would notice. But if he claimed hardship, he had an excuse. The room went silent, because she was right. For 3 years, every rejection had been disguised as necessity. Not preference, not favoritism, necessity. He hadn't needed bankruptcy. He needed cover. I left her house feeling sick, not because of the money, because of the calculation. Every conversation suddenly looked different. Every refusal, every excuse, every guilt trip. The wedding happened 2 months later, and that's where everything exploded. The resort wasn't just hosting the wedding. The wedding doubled as a grand opening event. Investors attended. Business contacts attended. Local media attended. Dad treated it like a personal achievement. Then someone made a mistake. A reporter interviewed Ethan. The article went online, and Ethan proudly described the property as a gift from his father, just like that. No careful wording, no strategic ambiguity. A gift. The article spread through the family within hours. The reaction was immediate. People who had defended Dad felt humiliated. People who had loaned him money during his supposed hardship felt furious. One uncle demanded repayment. Another relative publicly called him a liar. The narrative collapsed overnight. Dad tried damage control. He claimed the situation was misunderstood. Again, But nobody was listening anymore. The evidence was too obvious. The timing was too suspicious. And people remembered all the conversations they'd had with him over the years. The excuses, the complaints, the self-pity, everything. For the first time, relatives compared notes. And once they did, the contradictions became impossible to ignore. Dad had spent years telling different stories to different people. Not maliciously, strategically, always protecting his image, always managing perceptions, always making sure nobody saw the full picture. Until now, the fallout lasted months. Several relatives stopped speaking to him, not because of the resort, because of the deception. People can forgive generosity. They struggle to forgive manipulation, especially when they've been used. Linda defended him initially. Then she discovered something herself. Dad had hidden several financial accounts from her, not illegal, not secret assets in some dramatic sense, just accounts she didn't know existed. Money he controlled independently. That revelation damaged their marriage more than anything else. Trust disappeared. Meanwhile, Ethan became increasingly uncomfortable. For years he had benefited from the favoritism. Now everyone could see it, publicly, clearly. He couldn't hide behind explanations anymore. We eventually talked, really talked. For the first time in years, and something surprised me. He looked miserable, not defensive, miserable. He admitted he always knew Dad favored him, but he convinced himself it wasn't intentional. Then he convinced himself it wasn't unfair. Then he convinced himself everyone exaggerated. The resort shattered those excuses, because there was no innocent explanation for that. No misunderstanding, no different circumstances, no complicated context, just favoritism, on a scale nobody could ignore. The hardest conversation came later. Dad called me, months after the wedding, months after the fallout. Months after the family split into factions. He asked if we could talk. We met at a restaurant. He looked older, smaller somehow. For nearly an hour he explained himself. Not once did he say he hated me. Not once did he claim he loved Ethan more. Instead, he described how appreciated Ethan made him feel, how respected, how admired, how needed. Then he admitted something painful. When Chloe and I became adults, we stopped needing him. We built our own lives. We challenged his opinions. We disagreed. Ethan didn't. And over time, Dad gravitated toward the relationship that made him feel important. It wasn't a justification, but it was the truth. The favoritism wasn't about love. It was about ego. The resort wasn't about Ethan. It was about my father proving something to himself. That realization hurt more than I expected, because it meant the years of rejection weren't really about me. They were collateral damage, the byproduct of someone chasing validation. We never fully repaired our relationship. I don't think we ever will. Some betrayals aren't dramatic enough for movies. They're quieter than that. They're years of small choices, years of excuses, years of watching where someone invests their energy, attention, and sacrifice. Eventually, those choices reveal what matters most. Today, I still speak to Dad occasionally. Chloe barely does. Ethan keeps his distance from everyone. The family isn't completely broken, but it isn't the same, and it never will be. Because the biggest lie wasn't that Dad was bankrupt. The biggest lie was the story he told everyone about fairness. For years, we thought money explained the difference. Then we learned the truth. Money was just the disguise. The real issue was that some people will spend fortunes maintaining the image of being a good parent while quietly making choices that prove otherwise. And once you see that difference, you can never unsee it.